Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Carefulist, the podcast. I'm Katie Christophic, founder of The Carefulist. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have Lisa McFarland, and she empowers grievers and is the author of The Healing Path. And she's going to talk with us about all of the things that led to the creation of this book. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me.
I'm so glad that you're here because you have a very, I don't want to say unique necessarily, because there are lots of parents who have gone through what you've gone through. But from our show's perspective, we have not yet talked to someone um, who has had your particular journey. So let's start at that very beginning and talk about your caregiving story.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, my caregiving story probably started, when I was trying to fulfill my dream of having and raising healthy children. My daughter was born with a lot of complications, and after 13 months, we lost her to those complications. Um, and then our son, Zachary, who's still with us, thank God, is now 26. So, and in the mean time, we also had another son who we lost at birth. And my children's names, so I can say them and share them, are Alexis and Emmanuel. And so my story is a little bit unique just in the sense that losing a child is something certainly that people experience. And then weaving into them also having a very special, as my husband says, specially gifted son, but very specially abled, very highly medically intense child who,
Mhm.
as I said, he's now 26, but he has a he has an incredible life, quality of life. But, at 26 years old, he weighs 80 pounds. He's fed by a G tube. So we have advocated and fought for quality of life for him. But I was thinking about caregiving even prior to having our children because I was always very empathetic. So my caregiving probably started even as early as like grade school when I think of, going home and crying to my mom that somebody was bullied or someone was scorned, publicly by a teacher. I think I always had that in my heart, but I never had to carry it in the way that I've had to learn how to carry it now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's kind of been the origin, and during a time when I was thinking I would be able to do probably a little bit more grieving, I felt that we waited a significant amount of time before trying to then have add to our family. And when we did, it was so tumultuous that a lot of the grieving and the work that needed to be done for healing to come to pass couldn't be done because of the needs of our son Zach, who is our 26-year-old. So that's kind of how weaving in and out of trying to recover from the blows of losing two children in order to care for this very especially complicated young man, and at the same time every day and still to this day at 26 years knowing that his life is delicate and vulnerable, and that we can and may lose him as well. So it's a tricky path, but it's gotten easier in some ways as I've leaned into it and been able to heal a little bit more than when he was younger and it was so intense.
Yeah. Yeah. That you touched on something that is so universal to parenting. And it's when they're small and they need you for everything all the time, you don't have that time to think about and process things. And that is where I think you and I have something in common. Like when my kids were very small and my mom had Alzheimer's, and I just
Mm,
had to put that in the back of my head. Like I couldn't deal with that the way I may have dealt with it if my children were older, because I had to be mom. I had to be on it. I had to deliver everything the way that you would normally. Um, and so that is a very difficult thing to be able to process grief and need to be able to process it. And when you can't, that that is extremely difficult.
I think there's a lot of compartmentalization that goes on.
Yes.
And in the beginning, it's a way to move forward. But if you get too used to doing that, what ends up happening, in my experience, is that over time I became so disconnected. All those parts of myself that I was compartmentalizing, they were like silos, so there was no integration for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that listeners can appreciate that experience even without some of these things happening, where we're one person at work, we're one person at home, we're one person with our friends, we're one person, um, you know, out in the community and those kinds of things. So that is disintegration. And, when we think about the word disintegration, we think about, things being wiped out. And exactly that's what happens is when we are disintegrated, when things are not integrated, at least my experience has been that I lost any sense of anything other than my value as it related to what I could do for others. There was no innate value in my relationship to myself. And that is a fast road to depression and
Yes.
anxiety and hopelessness and isolation. So, yeah, that's not a great place to be.
Yeah. So when you were going through all of these things and very, very heavy, difficult experiences, how were you able to keep moving forward?
I think a lot of what we just talked about, which is the next task. And I
Yeah.
became, I have been very much this person of, well, make lemonade out of lemons, and oh, we got, a crap deal. So why don't I become a pediatric ICU nurse? Hey, there's an idea. So then I, got busy with that and was able to complete that. And it was always about knocking down that next domino and trying to get somewhere. So that I felt probably that I was able to move forward to some degree because I've always been sort of, goal oriented and let's get after it. And there's no point licking my wounds and kind of thing. But again, that has a cost when we
Mm.
do it over time. There was a lot of love in our home. My husband and I had met as, high schoolers. We had 6 years together before we ever got married. So we had a little bit of, history together. We both have families that cared very much about us and our life and Zach especially.
Mhm.
So those things, of course, are invaluable, and not everybody has that. But having said all that, it was a very day-to-day existence. And if I'm being
Yeah.
completely honest, which of course I am, our lives are still that way because we still have this adult dependent who, if he's in the room, his needs come first, and that is exhausting, and it can get overwhelming. And even with all that we've learned, it's still a very one day at a time
Yeah.
um, challenge. Even this morning, getting him where he needed to be, and we had a couple of unexpected things happen with him, and it's not, we're sort of never alleviated or,
Right.
taken off the hook for that responsibility, which is intense.
Well, and that's what I was just thinking. It's such a sustained having to be on all the time. And that in and of itself is Herculean effort.
It
So,
is,
yeah, yeah.
and we're not the only ones doing it. So, you know, but it is, it absolutely is. And I think if you aren't in that role, you can't appreciate what that means.
Mhm.
But I do know that, as you said, with your mom and your experience with her, we had spent some time with friends over the weekend, and one of our friends, has an adult, a parent living with them for dementia, and we were chatting about what exactly that means, and she was kind of saying, "Yeah, but I don't have the X, Y, and Z." And I said, "Well, but we share this experience of being accountable and responsible for the quality of life of someone that can't do that for themselves, and that is a huge responsibility." So we have a lot in common.
Yeah, yeah. From that perspective, there is a
Yeah,
lot, and it's a lot of pressure. And at the end of the day, you love
there's a
them
lot of
so
pressure.
much,
Yeah.
and you want the best for them, for what you can give. And as a caregiver, you often don't feel like whatever it is you're giving is enough. You're always questioning whether it's the right thing, particularly if they have a hard time communicating.
Yes. Yeah, and we care about their experience. So, for example, as a younger person in this bigger picture of what my life has been as a caregiver, I just thought if I make more money, that means more help, and if I can get more help, then I can make more money. And my career has kind of twisted and turned along the way with all those factors in mind. But what I didn't understand then that I know now, and that people generally don't understand, is it's not a matter of just getting help, because my son is critically dependent on me for just what feels like oxygen. His body works better when we're around each other more. We don't get a lot of time away from him as far as a break, mainly because we do have more resources now. We do have a system that we navigate. We do have a couple of folks who understand his meds and his feeds and all those things, his sensory, his communication. But we know that his health suffers when it's not us. And so again, it's this big responsibility of oh yeah, we could take so much time and try to go away and like leave him, but as I speak, it's like October, and I think we had one like a 5 night trip in the spring because a cousin of ours got married, and so that was amazing. Very difficult. We call it re-entry failure when we come back. Very difficult to come back and
Yes.
help him get over the hump of us being away. And we had a
Mhm.
couple more nights, got a little short trip in August. So it's people don't necessarily understand that we're mitigating the
Right.
collateral damage, because we know that it's not just a warm body that we need. It's not just a nurse that we need. It's not just someone that loves him. It's that we have this call or calling that necessarily ties us all together. And that too, can be frustrating. But we've learned um, as we've gone as well. So that's thank God. You know,
Yeah.
we learn as
Yeah.
we go.
It's so difficult when you are the person. Like it's this juxtaposition of a huge honor and wishing once in a while someone could just step in and
Yes.
do it the exact way you do and know that nothing is going to be a problem when you come back. And it's unfortunate that it's not the case because you need the break and it's good for everyone if you have
Yes.
the break. But then you're weighing that, is it really worth it? Because when I come back, it's going to be that phrase is perfect, that reentry period
Reentry
of,
failure,
oh, how
which
long is it going to
came,
take us to get back into our routine? And
the origin of that phrase, the girlfriend that I grew up with has an adult child who's also specially abled and is nonverbal and lives with her. And she and I used to throw that phrase around, and yeah, it came from another caregiver, I guess is just my point. But really what we're talking about is how do we get what we need without creating so much trauma for
Yes.
our person that we have to step away from to get refueled. When we
Hmm.
took this trip in the spring for 5 nights, the second day, I mean, we left on a Thursday. By Friday morning, we were already getting a call from the program that not only had he been in an exchange that where there was aggression and there was, there was a suspension looming because of how he responded, that they were saying, well, we're not actually sure that he's going to be able to come back at all. We were literally, there was just a blast of a fun kind of a party bus that we were taking. This was like around noon, on that second day, and we were
Hmm.
taking it to go on this boat ride with the wedding party. And so it's like, even when you're away, and
Yeah.
the threat of him not having a day program, which was terribly hard to find, that there was a good
Hmm.
fit that could be funded, that we could figure out how to get him there, that he was willing to go into, all of
Hmm.
those things. It's like, here we're trying to, we haven't even been gone for 24 hours and we're getting this phone call. And it just, so it's very difficult. But
Yeah.
I will say that, and you probably know this as well, and others who are in this role of being the very person, like you were saying, the person to
Hmm.
provide that support. One thing that I've learned and that I would share is that we have to figure out how to provide that for ourselves, almost on an energetic and emotional and even a spiritual level, where
Hmm.
for others, it might seem like the break would be to be physically out of the home or to be on vacation or to be, geographically separate. And what I've learned is that there are ways that I can um, manage my own energy and my ability to sustain these long periods of consistent, good, loving care where I'm not feeling desperate, where I'm not
Hmm.
feeling like I can't do it one more second. And those are things I can control. For example, I know that my number one self-care habit is sleep. And I
Hmm.
didn't know that before. So that was one of the things when I was working nights as a pediatric ICU nurse. My husband was in night law school. I would work, a 13, 14-hour shift, a couple in a row even, and come home, and then I would be on childcare duty for the day. And I, like you and everyone else, like, we live in this world where you can't be tired enough. Like, it's almost like we idolize that, or we celebrate it. Like, the more
Yes.
run down, the more tired, the more that's backed up, the thinner, like the more ragged we appear. Like, it's almost like, oh, you must it's like we honor that somehow. And the
It's the misery
later,
Olympics, and it drives me crazy.
oh my goodness gracious, I've never heard that term. And that's exactly right. And when you step out of that and realize that actually that's not what I'm going for,
Right.
and here are some of the things. Now, I can't control if he comes in and he's going to just be on the attack. And I have almost developed this sort of PTSD. I don't know if that's what it would kind of qualify as, but when I start to hear, because he has I take him to his program in the morning, he comes in the afternoon, and as the clock starts getting closer, I can feel my physiology change. I hear the doorknob, I feel my physiology change, because I know that my son has a potential of really physically harming and injuring me, that there's destruction to property, that it there's a lot of different ways that it can go, and sometimes it's actually perfectly fine. But if I dial in on things like rest and making sure that I have the things that, for my particular physiology and spirituality, what feed me, and it's different for everyone. But when I can dial in at least some of those, and it's never a perfect deal, that I'm better equipped to respond or not respond, which is usually the thing
Hmm.
that can help in real time when things like that are falling apart with him. Then I have a better shot. So that's, yes, getting away and being able to do something like sleep. Um, like at home, I have to. I make sure that I go to bed by a certain time, 5 days out of the week, right? Not like every day, but I really fight for that now. And before I felt like it was more of a weakness, like, oh, you should just be able um, to to be on all the time, like, a superhuman. And so anyway, when we start to identify those things, like that's a number one lever that I can pull for myself. For somebody else, it might be, I have to exercise a certain amount of time, or I have to eat certain things or not eat certain things or whatever.
Hmm.
But I find that empowering because then it's not how do I get out of here? It's I can start to get curious about what are those levers and
Hmm.
what's the combination that gives me the best shot because I
Yeah.
do love my son and there is no one who can help him be his best um, for as long as that's possible. And I want to be able to do that without having it cost me my own quality of life.
Yes.
The tough one.
It is a tough one, but it's so vital because when, like you said, when you know what sustains you, it's not that you don't need the exit, it's not that you don't need the break. It just helps you find smaller pockets or smaller windows of being able to have those little exits so that you can stay not just on your game, but also be the person that you want to be.
Hmm. And to create, a life and not feel like you've been sentenced,
Hmm.
um, not feel like you're sort of victimized, and that lower level energy where we're feeling like, why me? And this is so hard and no one understands. Those things will drive it, my experience. Again, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but that kind of self-talk will
Hmm.
get you into a deep, dark place that is very difficult to come back from. And I have been there, and um, it's not everybody comes back from that place. So
Right.
we want to empower ourselves to make choices that give us a better shot. And sometimes they work, sometimes they do not work.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a better shot than, oh, I'll just keep going and going and going and going. And at some point, things are going to get easier because that's not what happened in my situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are situations that it's just tough all the time.
Yeah. And the only way it's not tough is if I lose my son. And that is certainly not coveted
Right.
as a way of getting relief because then I have a different road. And I don't want
Yes.
that that other choice. No, thank you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
at least for as long as I can, I mean, for him to be 26 years, that in and of itself is amazing to us.
Mhm.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
Can you talk a little bit about what his diagnosis is? So for folks who are listening, they understand a little bit better about what you're working with.
yeah, sure. So I think we're all still trying to understand a little bit. There's a diagnosis that is a genetic diagnosis called Shwachman-Diamond syndrome. And over the course of us having a family, they have identified a genetic glitch where this shows up. But at the time, we were getting support for our daughter, and then also 4 or 5 years into Zach's life, it was just considered to be a syndrome. And it was a group of symptoms that were brought together by a gastroenterologist and a hematologist, Dr. Schwachman and Dr. Diamond, because what we were seeing is a mixture of a lot of orthopedic problem, or orthopedic actually is tertiary, a lot of GI problems. So what that looked like is like a diagnosis of failure to thrive, meaning that the person just can't, for whatever reason, they can't sort of get with their body can't get with the program.
Hmm.
There's a lot of digestive issues. There's an inability to tolerate food, an inability to gain and maintain weight, an inability, a lack of just hunger overall. And so, what that looked like with an infant and both of my children, both Alexis and Zach, is these explosive, just think about the worst diarrhea that any one of us has ever had, this kind of explosive situation because the fat doesn't get absorbed the way that it
Mm,
should.
mhm,
So all of it comes out. What it would look like would be like tablespoons of oil. It would
mm,
stain our furniture, our clothing,
yeah.
because it literally so the malfunction with Schwachman Diamond is pancreatic insufficiency.
Mhm,
Most people know about that diagnosis from cystic fibrosis. And
mhm,
so you'll see these fatty stools, failure to thrive, and like, probably not making pancreatic enzymes. So, in
yeah.
fact, Schwachman, I think, is the second leading cause of that particular symptom, relieved by enzyme replacement. So he was on enzyme replacement for quite a while, but then something happened in his body and there was a right formula that we were able to come up with that
Mhm,
so he gets tube fed anyway. So that's the GI side of it. And then the hematology side of it is it can show up as just failure to produce either any one of the three major components of blood, which would be red blood cells, which carry oxygen, white blood cells, which fight infection, and platelets, which clot the blood. So it can be any one of those things. So what you'll see is a lot of infection. You'll see a lot of anemia, lack of
mhm,
energy, and then bleeding disorders. So ultimately with our daughter, she got to a point where it was what they called a pancytopenia, which means none of those three components were being made. And at that
mhm,
point, there were other things going on as well, but she wasn't a candidate for a bone marrow transplant, which is what they would do in an otherwise healthy person. If that happened,
mhm,
we would transplant some stem cells and hope that, they would take off. But so it was really a combination of those two things. And then I guess the third component of this overall disease that Zach struggles with is orthopedic issues. So short stature, he has extremely bowed legs, and he's had many surgeries to try to help him ambulate, which he does still ambulate. But
mhm,
it's painful for him. He has terrible arthritis and things like that. So those are the three kind of GI, hematology, and orthopedic. And then we get into the fun stuff, the intellectual,
mhm,
um, what originally looked like delay, which became, not delay, but standard,
mhm,
and navigating. Because what we found out, I mean, initially, when you have a 4-year-old who's not speaking
mhm,
and not able to really communicate, you forget that it's possible that actually they're taking everything in, but they
mhm,
can't shoot it back to you. So I can't remember exactly what the situation was, but there came a day where he really kind of showed me that he was able to kind of demonstrate that he had this knowledge. And the way it started showing up is he got teased a lot because his body didn't look like others. And especially children, children are so curious. It's not that they
mhm,
necessarily mean to be cruel, but there
mhm,
was a particular day where we were kind of coming in from an activity, and because of his legs, he has kind of I guess, penguin, for lack of like a better way to describe it.
mhm,
And these two little girls that were walking by in our neighborhood, we were living in a townhouse, and they were kind of doing this and like, oh, look at the penguin kind of thing. And I noticed it, but I didn't appreciate that he also noticed it.
yeah,
So we went from having this activity to entering our home, and it was a cyclone. I mean, he was tearing shit up, just throwing
yeah,
and hitting and screaming. And it took me longer than I wish it had to be able to. The way I would calm him would be that deep pressure. We had a rocker, a glider, and it could take me hours sometimes to get him to settle. But eventually, during that process, as I was settling, it occurred to me, and when I was able to ask him about it, I could really understand. So the intellectual piece to me is the trickiest because he's highly sensitive. Very, if you speak about him like he's not in the room, that can
mhm,
throw him into, kind of a rage, and rightfully so. But now
yeah,
I can tell our family or people, anyone that's going to be around us for any period of time, if they don't already know him, do
mhm,
not speak, address him the way that you would everyone else. And he has a lot of verbal capability now that he didn't used to have.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are the areas that yeah, that we are trying to integrate all the time so that
Yeah.
he's in some kind of bell-shaped curve of what is normal for him, and having a quality of life. Because also the truth is, and you know this, when folks are out of control, when I'm out of control, it's a terrible feeling. It's terribly
Yes.
scary. It's traumatic. And so, you know, that is something, of course, that we want to avoid, which again, going back to the travel, it's like, is it worth letting him get all spun up about it, wishing he can
Hmm.
control it, but also realizing he can't? And we can
Yep.
fight that and try to prove our point, or
Hmm.
we can respect it and take it for what it is and try to work through it.
Yeah. As he's grown, because thankfully he's been with you longer than anyone thought, um, finding those supports has been, I know, a very difficult challenge. So as he's grown and changed and your life has changed with it, how did you find the program that he's in, and the support that you have? Because I think that is one of the biggest challenges
Mhm.
folks have, and one of the biggest questions we get is, what do we do? Where do we go? Who can help us?
Yeah, those are great questions. The programming side of it, I was very disappointed as I was learning, going through the system. And I happen to live in a county in Montgomery County in the state of Maryland that is extremely robustly um, built for folks with special needs. Much, if Zach had been born anywhere else, I'm not sure what our situation would be, but I feel very fortunate that we're here. But I also learned along the way that actually there are things available, but no one, even though we're involved with, caseworkers and like all those things, advocates, attorney, like whatever you need, but the county never sort of comes forward and goes, here are all the things you get to choose from. It's sort of like, as something fails, then you get shot into a couple other options. And then when one of those fails, so programming is just, there's no getting around, just really doing the research, talking to anyone and everyone. Um, I just, anytime I just always tried to find um, what are the programs that are available, and working with a dedicated advocate. When Zachary left grade school and went into middle school, and he was sort of hitting hormonal time, at that
Mhm.
period, I had it was the grace, right, of God. Like, I don't know why I knew to do this, but I got an educational advocate on board, thinking, I don't know if this is going to be easy or not, but better to get someone involved before we make that transition. And
Mhm.
that ended up being a really great thing. But because this particular individual had worked in this field for so long, she was able to share some of that information that the average parent is not going to be able to get just from kind of going on websites and things. So that's, one area. But from the caregiving perspective, which I think is the bigger piece, because eventually they do grow out of, you know, they
Right.
they grow out of school and all those things. If for a child, um, caregiving is easier for me because I've gone through this. We had for most of his life, we had nursing care until he became an adult, which was so handy to change during COVID. So we went from having nursing to having no nursing and no programs. I'm sure others have had
Mhm.
similar terrible
Yeah.
experiences. That was really hard. But what I know for sure about caregivers is this: you can teach and train anybody that is a good, loving, compassionate, empathetic person. They need things like work ethic and commitment things, of course, but a responsible individual can be taught the specific needs of the person that you're giving care to. But what
Mhm.
you cannot teach is the things that I just mentioned. You cannot teach empathy. You cannot, well, and in the confines of our chat about caregivers. So what I
Mm.
found is that when I find someone that Zachary clicks with, because he has sort of this visceral reaction to people one way or to kind of like a, I hate to say it, but like a dog, right? A dog can smell out, sniff out, not so friendly with that person. But if they're all like, yeah, hi, oh, I want to sniff you
Hmm.
and lick you and whatever, it's like they're sensing something. So because
Yeah.
of that, finding people like we would go through nurse after nurse, and then, we would have overnight care. We had different shifts of nursing that were covered. And when I found someone who seemed to have sort of those qualities that I mentioned, those really important qualities of commitment and compassion and appreciation for the fact that this is a life who has feelings and thoughts and needs and joys and aversions just like we do, then when they could connect with him, then I would really invest in that person through making connection, just person to person, you
Hmm.
know, trying to understand, well, what else do they have going on in their lives, and when we get these people, just really cultivating that connection with Zach. So, for example, we have a caregiver that is a Saturday guy and we met him in 2012. And since
Mm.
2012, most Saturdays, and I dare say maybe 48 out of 52 in a year, he and Zach are together. And through
Hmm.
that time, he's grown. But I could see right away that there's this connection. So when he moved, when he had kids, when all those things, you find a way to make that part of that, make it a shared experience, not like, oh, great, now he's got his own family. It's like, and
Hmm.
at some point, he may not want to do that anymore, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But when we're looking at caregivers, we're looking at people in our immediate community that already sort of exude or exemplify some of these qualities we're talking about. And then what is their price point?
Hmm.
And what makes it work for them? So like what can we operationalize that allows this all to sync up? Because those are the people that are going to make your life bearable. One of his
Yeah.
nurses, I think we had for at least 15 years. She's since moved out of the country, actually. But finding those people to kind of bring along. And then the flip side is, of course, when you get an instinct about somebody, don't try to
Yep.
force them to fit that mold because you're wasting your time.
100%. Yeah.
And, I guess now I'm thinking the other thing I would share is we have to tell everyone we know what we need, not
Yes.
because they can show up for us, but because they might know somebody. Like the person I was just sharing used to be a paraeducator for a special ed teacher that Zach had had years prior to 2012. But I was always emailing, always texting, hey, do you know anybody? Here's what we need.
Hmm.
Another caregiver that's been with us for like 20 years was introduced to me through another nurse at a hospital that I worked at when I was looking for care. She gave me the name of a person that had a child care. That person couldn't help Zach because he was special needs. Got this other woman's name who wasn't in the child care business, but
Hmm.
we were able to sort of, okay, well, what kind of hours, what kind of money are you looking to make? How do you feel about these things? And now this particular person, all she does for us is medication and supply management. I still pay. She's not in our day-to-day life with Zach, but she still has room in her schedule for that. So I make sure that that's part of his, overall care budget and things. So letting people know what we need. Of course, that requires us to figure out what we need also, which can
Yeah.
be a challenge.
That's one of the hardest parts, right? Being able to, you
Absolutely.
know what needs to be done, but figuring out what someone else can do and what you are comfortable delegating. That's the hardest thing is what can I let go? What should I let go?
Yeah,
What
for
must I
sure.
let go?
Yes, exactly. And so, for example, with the medication piece, she might work an hour or two a month on that, which may not seem like a lot if you're somebody else. But to me, I know that that's 12 hours a month. I mean, 12 hours in a year. that I don't have to put forth. And also having stocked syringes and tubes and all the medications that he's on, everybody knows how hard it is to get meds and get them refilled and get them with all the crazy stuff with insurance and Medicaid and all those things. Um, so I'm happy to have that 1 hour a month because it's part of an
Well,
aggregate sense of help.
exactly. It's not just that physical 1 hour of pulling it together, it's the mind space that it takes up of having
Absolutely.
to constantly think about it and do the math. How many more of these do I have? When do I have to place the order? Somebody
You
to
nailed
take
it.
that is
You nailed
huge.
it. It is the
Yeah.
space because those are the spaces I have found that during the day we don't realize how much it takes from us. But you put a dozen of those things that we're always thinking about, and then we say, "Oh, I couldn't sleep last night." Surprisingly, why would that be? I mean, because
Mhm.
so many folks, especially caregivers, are vulnerable to insomnia and
Yeah.
chronic sleep deprivation. But a lot of folks will say, this one of the number one problems a lot of us are experiencing right now. I fortunately sleep like a baby these days, most days, but because I've dialed in all this other stuff. But to your point, clearing out that little bit of space of my mind exponentially pays off in the bigger picture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you've been able to pull this team together. It is no small feat to
No, and it's
get
ongoing, right?
right, right.
It's it's always we just had one of our caregivers go out on maternity leave, so we're struggling right now. And it's, but it you just you have but he's at a day program for 6 hours, which is what enables me to speak with you this morning. So,
Mhm.
those people, but I guess what I'm saying is that it's an easy trap to fall into when something falls comes out from underneath us.
Yeah,
It's easy to just feel, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't face going on care.com again because I got no other resources right now or trying to figure
right.
those things out. But you keep churning. You have to keep churning. You have to
Mhm.
not feel defeated by it so that you can get to work because otherwise you will just completely fall apart.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is no, there's no shame in that game. I'm just saying I would
Yep.
rather not be falling apart and having done it both ways and every way in between. I don't want to live that way because it's very scary.
Yes. Yeah. Making your way to peace is the goal, right?
Yes.
So I think that's the perfect segue to talk about the book that you wrote called The Healing Path. Um,
Yeah.
so I'll let you talk about it. I'm not going to say anymore.
Yeah, thanks. I about, well, 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, finally started writing, and I will just share for anyone listening that I don't have any answers, but that trying to navigate Zachary's quality of life and not dealing with my grief did have me in a depression that was very scary, not just once, but the most recent one was right after I really finally started expressing what these experiences were with my daughter, with my son, both of whom I lost. And what I started to realize, I started writing, and I wrote a blog. I started blog posting and things, and for myself more than anything else. And what I started realizing is the themes of what was giving me relief and what was helping me get stronger. Those themes, there weren't that many. They were repeating themselves. So I thought, okay, these could really help somebody. So I put them all together in a book, The Healing Path, and it was finished, I think, about 4 years ago. And what I did was I sort of shared my story, and then I was laying out, these are the 10 stepping stones, one or none or some of which may help you navigate your own path.
Mhm.
But when I got it all together, I was like, no one's going to read this. I don't even want to read it. Like, it's too much. So I thought, okay, if I pull it apart in smaller sizes. So the first book, The Healing Path, is part one. It's a 3-book series. So part one is stay present. then and so that has like the first three stepping stones, and so it like half of it is kind of my history and story with my kids dying, and not too much about Zach. And then, here are the first three things that I levers that I've pulled, and one of them was learning how to just stay present, how to be
Mhm.
still. That shows up as very, very regular meditation practice and things for me. But I don't call it meditation because it doesn't have to be that formal. There are different ways to access
Yeah.
stillness. But anyway, so that was the first book. So there's three kind of stepping stones, and the second book is about to come out. So it's kind of timely. But stay grateful,
Mhm.
because unless we can learn what we have that's valuable, we don't stand a chance, or I don't feel like I would have stood a
Yeah.
chance. And I don't mean forcibly being grateful. Oh, I'm grateful for the sun, I'm glad it's up, I'm grateful for, but like to really understand that the things that are going well in my life, the place that I was born, to be born in a country where women have rights, to be in a county that even has a program, that even has the materials that could keep Zach alive, those things, learning how to recognize them, and then the smaller that kind of grows into smaller everyday gratitude that just it increases and improves my own quality of life. So three more stepping stones. And in that book, I talk about suicide because I did lose a person close to me who committed suicide as a younger person, even became before I became a mom.
Mm.
And I wanted to address, kind of how that affected me, because the stepping stones are applicable to a lot of different experiences.
Yeah.
And then the last book is, um, let's see, Stay Present, Stay Grateful, Stay Healing is the third book, and that is not coming out quite yet. But yeah, it's my personal experiences. And then here are some of the bigger things that I felt like helped me. And then I try to break it down to, okay, so what does that mean? Like, how can I get more grateful? Like, for example, I have this thing that you could try where I had a patient in the pediatric ICU that would come back quite a bit, and he was paraplegic. And so
Mhm.
eventually it was intubated, and I mean, he couldn't even press the call button. So he really, like, I would spend not hours, because no nurse has hours, but I would spend a lot of time trying to get him comfortable just so, and it would just take so long. And he was so patient. He was always grateful. So the activity for the reader is like, lie down on your bed, face up, put your hands down, and stay still for 5 minutes. And then when you want to move, don't. Imagine that you couldn't move, and do
Mhm.
it for as long as you can stand it. If it's 30 seconds, if it's 3 hours, but to try to, again, operationalize, try to really create, try to help those experiences teach us what can help us without us having to actually be paraplegic. So some of those real
Yeah.
life experiences, here's what you can try, here are different things. And it won't all speak to everyone, but I feel like there's so much in there. There are ten experiments for each stepping stone. So there's like 30 different things right out of the gate that might help, might make it easier to care for your loved one, easier to appreciate, easier to navigate whatever it is that
Yeah.
you're navigating. So,
Well, thank you for sharing your story and for putting it, I am a firm believer, and it's why, we have the site with the resources, but we also have the podcast because people take in information in different ways.
mm,
So by telling your story this way, it will reach people who see and perceive the world through hearing. And then through your book, they can read the story and get a little bit deeper into it and see how it can apply to them. And the experiences that you've had and the wisdom that you've gained, it could be so easy to have gone a different way.
yes, ma'am.
And it is no small thing that you have handled it the way you have. And
Thank you.
thank you for sharing what you've learned. And I know as a mom, a lot of that just comes from being a loving parent, right? And wanting the best for all of your children. and or talking to other families who are dealing with maybe not the exact same thing, but a very similar experience with lots of different challenges.
Yeah.
And just being able to see you this far down the path,
Hmm.
and it's possible.
It's possible. And I thank you, Katie, because, the work that you're doing now and facilitating these kinds of open discussions and ability to share. I feel like I could talk about my situation for way longer than anybody's going to want to hear, but you're creating this, facilitating this connection and through community. And so, the community that you've created, and I too have found community to be another big lever that we can pull. And whether that's a small group of girlfriends that is part of a support group, like a special needs support group for parents, or the community that you've created. And I've created this community online that you and I have chatted about, but called Scars to Medals, the idea being, let's not hide our scars. They're actually medals. We've earned them. Let's show them off.
Yes.
And we're actually going to kind of rebrand. We're in the middle, I should say, of rebranding, and we're going to launch that community again under a different name. And I've pulled in some of the folks that I know understand grief and that too understand the importance of connection. And so I guess the point is, wherever listeners can find community, that is one major advantage of technology that we have, is we do not have to walk our path alone, and nor should we. We're not built to do it alone. We're built
Right.
to do it. Connection and belonging are in our DNA, and wherever we can find that, if it's just one other person, that's your community.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that's
community
really
doesn't have to
important.
be hundreds of people. It's whoever you can connect with and have that base level of understanding of what you're dealing with.
Yeah. Seeking the connection. I would just, yeah, repeating that because it's so important. Because I do think that connecting like you and I are doing right now, I feel like, the rest of my day, I already have this energetic boost because I've been able to speak with someone who, understands the experiences of being the caregiver, and also just cares about the fact that I'm here. And so we really need to encourage one another. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're not alone. We're not alone. We've got to work at this, but we can do it. We can have a life, and we can still show up in a way that we can be proud of, and damn it, we need to be proud of.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And on that note, for those of you listening or watching, wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us today. You can find her book on our site, carefulist.com. And when the new version of her community launches, you will also be able to find it there. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Take care.